Hola, buenas tardes. ¿Cómo está mi gente? Órale, para empezar, quiero saber cuántas personas aquí hablan español. Levante la mano. Hay muy pocos. Casi puro gringo que no habla español. Pobrecitos, ¿no? Okay, so if you don't speak Spanish, basically what I said is, hi, my name's Eric. Thanks for coming. So if you don't speak Spanish, even the fact that I came out here and started to speak Spanish wasn't surprising. Well, why is that? I mean, we live in a very linguistically diverse community. So, for those of you who don't speak Spanish, that was a lot different than if I came out here and started speaking Russian, which would have been really cool, but unfortunately I don't speak Russian. So now what I'd like to do is draw your attention to the photograph I have up on the screen, and I want you to think about your daily commute, or even the drive over here to this venue today. As you think about your commute, seeing signs like this in Spanish and English probably isn't a big deal. It happens, it's all over the place. It's something that we have just become accustomed to since we live in such a linguistically diverse community. But to others that don't live or aren't fortunate enough to live in a community like this might seem strange or weird, right? Actually, to people who live here that see this, they probably might even consider it strange or weird too, but it's here, so they're used to it. But does anybody, at whatever side of the coin you're on, have you ever thought about why this pattern exists? Why is it normal to see somebody speaking Spanish? Why do we have English and Spanish coexisting in this particular format? Right? That's something that we can call Spanglish, the use of English and Spanish strategically to communicate messages. Well, we're going to find out. The next graphic I have up here is from the Census Bureau, and it states that 13% of the United States speaks Spanish. Now, this can be surprising to some. To others, as we just talked about, it might not be that big a deal. But I think it raises three specific points that are worth unpacking. So first, the 13% doesn't indicate that the majority of these folks also speak English. Right? Which then, when you have English and Spanish speakers, that manifests in amazing bilingual communities, where people use English and Spanish to operate their everyday lives. But they also implement a strategy of Spanglish to convey messages that in such a way that it's natural, it's just normal in order to be a productive community member. Okay, the second point is that with such a number of Spanish-speaking communities, large number of Spanish-speaking communities, that often fuels anti-immigrant rhetoric that politicians use to shape the way that everybody else in society sees language minority communities and their language patterns in terms of a deficit, really. And unfortunately, that can cause people to support programs that suppress languages other than English, especially in an academic realm. Now, that brings me to my third point. This type of linguistic trend emphasizes the crucial role that schools and teachers play in the process of accommodating students in their academic and linguistic progress. Now, when language is conflated with a deficit view, unfortunately, teachers often see that integrating community language patterns like Spanglish in a classroom setting can be counterproductive to academic achievement, instead of realizing that it can be a powerful resource to enhance academic progress. Well, what I want to do today is unpack Spanglish, like the concept of Spanglish, and give some examples so that the next time you hear it or see it, you'll be more prepared to have a discussion about how sound and valuable of a resource it actually is. So what is Spanglish? Well, Spanglish has been described by a ton of different people, from academics to comedians, politicians. Today, I just want to give a general description so that you will have that in your toolkit to have your conversations with your friends. So Spanglish is a form of communication that is employed by Spanish and English speakers. It shows bilingual dexterity. It's not a modge podge or a mishmash of language. It is actually very linguistically sound, which we'll see in a minute. On some subsequent slides. But most importantly, it's not a deficient form of language that the Real Academia Española, the Royal Academy of Spanish, previously had in their dictionary that it was a deformed form of Spanish. Right? Fortunately, a good colleague of mine, a language and social justice colleague, Ana Celia Santea, she led an initiative to have the Real Academia Española take that out of the dictionary so that it wasn't promoting such a negative view of it. And finally, Spanglish is not a new language. It is a strategy that is employed by Spanish and English speakers to convey messages in very creative ways. So let's look at some examples and some of the linguistics of this. Now, Spanglish comprises a variety of different characteristics. First, I think the most noticeable to people would be code switching, code being language, okay? So for code switching, you have two different types. One, you have intrasentential, so within the sentence. And that's the very first example. So I have, anoche, when I went to the store, vi a Giulia. Now, it breaks at certain points that tell us that the syntax of both languages is still intact. So syntax is the structure of the language. So you would never hear anoche when yo went to the store, or anoche when I fui to the store. That just wouldn't happen, okay? But anyway, so that tells us that there are certain ways that languages are transitioned, usually at the clause level. Depends on whether it's at the beginning of an adverbial or a prepositional phrase, but it's very predictable. The other way is intersentential, so between utterances or sentences. Anoche cuando fui a la tienda vi a Giulia. She looked at me but didn't even say hi. Like, qué fea, right? Okay. The other way that folks have described Spanglish is by focusing in on the vocabulary. And this is often where you find points of contention, especially in classrooms. So there are distinct loan words, okay? The first one that I have up there is el Walmart, okay? Now, this is funny, and when my friends say, oh, that's so funny, they say el Walmart, I'm like, okay, they say el Walmart in Spanish. How do you say el taco in English? Taco. Same thing, right? Well, you also have words that are English words, but they're Hispanicized, and they contour to the phonology or the sound system of Spanish, and also the orthography or the writing. So the next example is troca, which means truck. Right? Now, troca is often seen as a slang term by a lot of Spanish speakers who are from other countries, but in reality, there are more people that use troca than like in the entire country of Costa Rica. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean that it's better or worse. It just means that that's a regional dialect of Spanish that uses that particular word. We also have words like biles for bills, okay? The last one that I have is one of the most fascinating to me, watchear, which means to watch, but it's turned into a verb that can then be conjugated in over 50 different ways that Spanish speakers conjugate verbs, again demonstrating linguistic soundness. And the last set of vocab words that I wanted to go over have to do with direct translations from Spanish to English. Now, in English, if you have a cognate, that's like hospital and hospital. These words are different because in Spanish, in Spain or Argentina or Mexico, librería means a bookstore. What do you think it means here? Library. Right. So in other countries, you might use biblioteca instead of librería. But that doesn't mean that librería is wrong, especially when you have kids that grow up using it. Now, I was really excited when I heard that the Mid-Columbia Library System actually uses the word librería to describe library when they translate their materials, which is it's a very progressive step to counter the deficit view of words like this. Carpeta is a folder in other countries. Here it's a carpet. Colegio is one that I use a lot. In other Latin American countries, it means like a high school level. Here, I use it with colegio comunitario when I talk to parents about getting their kids into college. So colegio comunitario would be a community college. Again, it's different, not wrong. It's just a regional dialect variation. Now, beyond just the code switching, beyond the way that vocabulary works with Spanglish, I really want to emphasize the importance of the identity that it represents. So the statement that I have up here is from Eva. Okay, she was an 8th grader that I interviewed as part of some research in Central Phoenix. And I asked her, she was born in Mexico, and she grew up, the majority of her life here speaking English and Spanish, used Spanglish quite often. And so I said, Eva, why do you use Spanglish? And this is the most eloquent statement you could actually get, right? Like it's used to me, like I'm used to it. And so that shows the very endearing and powerful ways that language shapes our identity. And then again, when it's couched as wrong or incorrect, that's attacking the student's identity. What I want to do now is show how students who are in the classroom and told that Spanglish is wrong leave that classroom and operate in their everyday lives in Spanglish, seeing it all over the place. And so let's look at some examples. Now, the one I have here has some translation, but it's very creative. So you have lunch and lonche, right? Direct translation. But you have kinds of meat, asada, adobada, whatever else they had going on. And then tipos de carne, beef, pork, chicken. But on a base level, you have to think, okay, so they're communicating a message. It's not about passing a standardized state exam. So this works. Okay, here I have a sign from the local flea market where you do have a lot of translating. The interesting part to me is down here where it says, por favor, boleto en la ventana, like get your ticket in the window. In English, it's like, must get a stamp. There's no loss of communication. They just said it a little differently. This is my favorite. So in Spanish, chivos means goats. In Spanish, that number is cuatro. And in Spanish, that word, sale, would mean like going out or leaving. So if people were confused by Spanglish, you would think that they would say, oh my God, cuatro chivos, like 4 goats are running down the road. That doesn't happen because it's chivos for sale. This one, no hacer parking, like parking is the noun, right? But the interesting part is that Department of Transportation is supporting it. So now you have the government using it to communicate the message. This one's great too because it shows very creative ways of announcing. Let's do this one. Yarda sale. Okay, yarda that's one of those calcs. It's a word in Spanish, but in other countries it means the unit of measurement. Here it means yard. And then it's not sale, it's sale. So that communicates very clearly what's going on. The other one is even better. I want everybody, just to yourself real quick, say the word yard sale. You don't pronounce the D. So this individual was aware of how to say it and used Spanish writing to convey what that event was. Now, this one's pretty cool, too. So calabazas de Halloween, right? Halloween's an English word, and they use the umlaut. So here's somebody that used prescriptive academic Spanish writing system to spell the word Halloween. You know, those were all examples of community uses of Spanglish that people think are funny. They're really not. They're very powerful and sound. Now let's look at corporate uses of Spanglish. So remember, in school, kids are often taught, no, that's bad, it's wrong, you shouldn't do it. Well, you have the biggest restaurant chain in the world using it, humongous pop distributors using it, U.S. Cellular, so you got cell phones using it. Tú pediste más, you got it. Órale, right? ESPN, ESPN Play, click aquí, solo en ESPN Play. Professional sports. Music, pop culture. It's a way of life. Yet for some reason, when kids come into school, they see this kind of stuff. Now this picture was taken at a local school that has the districts here have really good bilingual programs where students learn literacy in their first language, and then it is bridged to English so they develop bilingual proficiencies in speaking and literacy. But these kids come in every day, it's a Spanish-speaking bilingual program, and see that at the front of the room. Ironically, it says di no a Spanglish, just say no to Spanglish, but they had to use Spanglish to say no to it, which is really interesting to me. Now, instead of saying don't use Spanglish, there are multiple ways that teachers could incorporate it into the classroom to enhance their instruction. Here's one really basic way. You have kids write out a phrase in Spanglish, or you take those signs or lyrics, whatever, and you highlight it in the middle and have them code switch it to academic Spanish and academic English. Then you can draw connections in the writing and spelling. You can, in the grammar, if you speak Spanish, you can talk about different grammar systems and spelling and tenses in a safe and nurturing way without denigrating their identity. But once again, you see this kind of stuff is more pervasive than that. So why should teachers use community language patterns, in this case Spanglish, in the classroom? One, as I just showed, you can bridge students' community language skills to enhance their academic language registers. Next, you can really propel them academically by making content accessible. Let them talk about it using their community language and make those connections to the academic registers. But I'm more in favor of doing this for other reasons too, like honoring their identity. Let them know that how they speak, who they really are, is valued and is an asset in a school setting. By doing this, you're also cultivating what's called meta-linguistic awareness, which is a student's awareness of how language works. So they know what forms are appropriate in what contexts, instead of just being afraid to use what they've grown up speaking. And the most important, when you do things like integrate Spanglish into your classrooms, when you have library systems using community language patterns on a broader level, you counter broader deficit perspectives of language minority communities and their language patterns, which in this current political climate is run rampant, okay? So I hope now, the next time when you're in a discussion and somebody laughs or giggles at a Spanglish sign, it's okay to laugh and giggle too, but then you can unpack it and say, actually, I wish I could do that. Gracias.